in terms of adoption specifically, there is a difference between the Islamic perspective and, say, Scots law perspective. From the Scots law perspective, when you go through that adoption process, the child, in essence, it becomes almost like your blood child. So that child will inherit from you and so on. So it's almost like having a biological child. There's no difference. I've already said that lineage, because lineage is so important, Islamic law says yes, you should look after that person. You do all these things. However, that child is not your biological child. It's not your blood child. It can't be like your blood child. So therefore, there are some rules here. I just said the case about Zayd bin Haritha, how his name was changed. I'll come to the name in a minute. But one practical reason for this is that, let's say, for hypothetically, you take someone, you give them your name, and that person's brought up as your child, and then in the future he meets his biological sibling and then falls in love, right? And this has happened. This has actually happened. So because that can happen, it potentially can happen, the lineage has to be preserved so that these things do not happen. Because obviously from our perspective, that'd be incest if you fell in love with your biological sister and married her. So that can be very problematic. So that's why the lineage is so important. Now, coming to practical issues, there's three main practical issues. So first of all, inheritance, naming, and the mahramiyah, which is a category of people who you cannot marry. So we'd said in Scots law, obviously it inherits just the same way it would as a blood child. Well, it wouldn't automatically inherit the child wouldn't automatically inherit in Islamic law. However, you're allowed to give a third of your wealth to a non-inheritor. So although the child wouldn't automatically inherit, what you could do is you could put in your bequeath that a certain amount, quarter, whatever it is, up to 1/3 of your wealth you could leave for that adopted child. So you could, in essence, do the same thing for your child and the adopted child. So it wouldn't be there wouldn't be any negativity there for that child in terms of inheritance. Going on to the naming, most of you probably, or maybe many of you, think that you're not allowed to change the child's name. Now, the issue around the name is to do with lineage. Okay, what we're not allowed to do is pass off that child as your biological child when he's not. So the issue is about lineage, and I'll give you an example of where practically that can go wrong if we don't do that. However, if it's understood, the child's lineage is understood, and everyone knows it, you know it, your family knows it, your relatives know it, your community kind of knows it. But because I had this question a number of times now, okay, we've got 3 children and we've got this one child who, has got a different name. And if this child has a different name, it's going to feel left out. It's going to say, why have I got a different name? It's too young to understand. So if the lineage issue is dealt with, you could change your name to whatever you want. If my name is Amer Jamil, my father's name was Muhammad Jamil, right? My uncle's name is Muhammad Salim. So if I tomorrow say, I feel like changing my name to Amer Salim, is there anything that can stop me? No. You can change your name to whatever you want. Right? People do it all the time. People change your name all the time. But what you can't do is change your lineage. I can't say I am the son of Salim, right? But I can say I like the name Salim. I want to change it to Salim. So changing your name, anyone can change their name. So the name is not an issue. The issue is about lineage. So if what you could do, if you said, look, I want to keep the same name for all the children, what I would suggest is, the original name of that child, the original surname, you keep it as a middle name. And you can give your family name to the child so that everyone has the same family name. And then when the child gets of age, obviously at one point you're going to tell them that they've been adopted and tell them the truth, and they're old enough to understand. Then you can say, look, this is your real parents, your biological parents. And then the child can choose. If he wants to change his name, he can change his name. If he doesn't want to change his name, it's not a problem. So I don't think the name is a huge issue, and we shouldn't really make it into a huge issue. The issue's about lineage. Brings us on to the third issue, which is mahramiyah, or what's called a mahram. You're somebody who you cannot marry. Now, the adopted child, or if the child was in your care, there is no link between you and them in terms of blood relation. Okay, so hypothetically, they could marry your adopted child could marry The adopted boy could marry his sister, yeah, the sister, because there's no blood relation between them. There is another way out of this in Islamic law, which is to do with what's called rida. Rida is when it's breastfeeding. So what happens is, if a child is breastfed before the age of 2 lunar years, then in terms of the rule of mahramiyah is established. So what happens is, so if say a woman breastfed a child before the age of 2 lunar years, then that child will, she can't marry that child anymore, so there's mahramiyah established there. And also the children, her children, cannot marry that child either. So what happens is, in terms of rules of hijab, in terms of rules of khalwa, of being alone together, they're all absolved. They're just like a biological child in that sense. So this obviously is very helpful when it comes to day-to-day practical issues, because otherwise what happens when a child gets to the age of puberty, obviously they become an adult Islamically. They have to pray, they have to fast. If they've got money, they need to give zakat. If it's a girl, she'd need to wear hijab in front of the father, if this hadn't happened, and also if it was a boy, then the mother would have to wear hijab when the boy came to puberty, because they're not related. So this gets round that issue, and again, it's only really going to affect those Muslims who are quite strict about this, because not everyone is. Some women don't wear hijab, so it's not going to be an issue for them. So it depends on on the situation. In terms of that's the kind of really kind of practicalities in terms of our reality. So in the past, what you would have found was people generally had very large families, very extended families, and one of the speakers was talking about how they would look for carers in the extended family. So if you think of, like, there was a natural disaster in Pakistan, the earthquake, when lots of people died, but what happened was those children, some of them had grandparents, some of them had uncles and aunts and so on, and they kind of looked after them. That has changed a lot now. Not everyone has a very big or large family. We talked about asylum seekers who've come here who maybe are disconnected from their relatives from back home. So that's a reality that's different now. Second thing is that you get children born out of wedlock. Obviously this is not allowed in Islam, but it happens. And then because of the fact that there might be pressure put on that person to give up the child because of the taboo, the honour and so on in the community. So what happens is these children then are given up or abandoned. So they're another category of people who obviously, again, it's something which is contemporary, it's happening. And you saw the statistics there, there's lots of Muslim children who do end up going into care for a number of reasons, and they're obviously going to need either foster carers or at some point adoption. So that's our reality, that there are children out there, Muslim children, who are in need of either fostering or adopting. So what I would say is you should consider, if sometimes we have this thing in the Muslim community, someone has a lot of girls and they're desperate to have a boy. So why don't you think of adopting? Instead of keep trying, maybe it's not meant for you, maybe think of adopting a boy. And if you've got all boys, okay, not looking at anybody, Amjad, right? If somebody's got a lot of boys and desperate to have a girl, they could think about adopting a young girl. So that's an option. Or even if it's somebody that's not married, or you might be married, but you're a bit older and your possibility of you having children is maybe not there. You could think about adopting, or you could you've done all, you've been there, got the T-shirt and all that kind of stuff. You've brought up your children, they've gone to university. You're like, thank God, time to take a bit of a break. Well, why waste all the skills that you've acquired over 20, 30 years of hard slog? Now you're the best person to adopt or be a foster care, because you have all the skills. You know what to do and what not to do. So there's lots of options. Even for say a woman who's not married, and say for example she wanted to adopt a baby boy, the milk can be medically induced. So you can even medically induce it, because all it actually requires is even a drop to be ingested by the baby for that relationship to establish. So there's lots of options if you go down that route that we can explore. Final thoughts before we go into a Q&A. Like I said, a lot of us sponsor orphans abroad, a lot of us sponsor children abroad, but we should try to think about the children in our own communities, in our own country, who are also suffering. Saving people's lives in this country is just as important as saving lives abroad, and I really do think it is saving somebody's life. For the parents today here who have got children, I want to ask you a question. If tomorrow, God forbid, you passed away, okay, and you left this world, would you not want somebody good to look after your children? Would you not want someone to step up and say, okay, I'm going to help this person out and help them, guide them at least their formative years until they become an adult? We all would, wouldn't we? So we should think about other people in that same situation. We're all sinners. We're all trying to be the best Muslims we can be. Maybe we don't pray enough and give enough sadaqah and fast enough. But there's a very easy way to get to paradise, which is that hadith. It could be that that you done all these things in your life, but the one thing that you did was you took care of a child, gave them, a good start in life. Either that person makes dua for you continuously, or like the hadith of the orphan, the Prophet said that he'll be like this with me in paradise. So it's a very easy ticket to paradise. It could be your salvation on the Day of Judgment. Maybe none of your actions will be accepted apart from that one action. So it's something to think about. And lastly, what I'd say is that every human being that comes in this world has a right to be loved, has a right to be cared for, and they should know that somebody loves them, and they should know that people care about them. And if that's the case, then all that's required for us is to show them that we care. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا الحمد لله رب العالمين.